Yes, so it's sort of from two different places. So my grandfather, who actually just died very recently, who is from Cuba, was a prodigious storyteller. And so growing up, he would tell us these stories that were very distinctly Cuban in that they were very funny and very sad at the same time. So he would tell a story where he was like, well, once when I was young, I had this pet rooster, and then one day we couldn't find the rooster, and then we were eating dinner, and Mom was like, we're eating your rooster. and he would tell us that story, and I was a small child, and I was like horrified at the story that he would tell us. And every story he told was like that. Like, they were always very funny and very sad at the exact same time. And there was something about that sort of sensibility that I think really influenced my writing and really spoke to me. And I think you can see it in my work. I think that sort of way in which things are very funny and very sad at the same time is something that I think I do a lot in my writing. And then also, when I was younger, I had this really wonderful teacher, and we were reading a lot of, we were in English class. It was a high school, like secondary school, and that we were reading a lot of like Ernest Hemingway and Shakespeare, all of whom are fine, but it was too much. And we hadn't read any women or any people of color or anything. And I was very just cranky all the time in class. And so one day she came in and she had a pile of books that she had brought from her own library. And she said, I can tell you're mad all the time, so here you go. And she gave me this pile. And it included 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I had never experienced sort of magical realism or fabulism in that way, where there was, this sort of, where magic existed in this sort of space. It was this very liminal space. And I had just never seen anything like that. I mean, I had read a lot of fantasy and science fiction as a child, but it was always, the science fiction was, like in the future, or the fantasy was like another world, but there was something about the way in which those stories, sort of the magic and the real, existed on these planes together that really spoke to me, that that I really loved. And then realizing that that was actually a specific sort of cultural tradition that not in exactly, because obviously he was Colombian, it's not, but I was very interested in the way in which how that sort of strain of storytelling kind of, evolved and developed, and was very interesting to me. And I think gave me a new way of looking at the world and looking at, how do you tell interesting stories. And for me, it was you puncture through reality, and you let magic and weird stuff and ghosts bleed back through. And there's something really beautiful about that I think, and that was the first time that I think I felt that. And I read it, and I remember thinking and, that book came out before I was born, but I was reading it going, I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know you were allowed to do that, and so that was really, really important to me. So I feel whenever I think about that sort of oral tradition of my grandfather, that sort of the humor and the sadness kind of in this one piece, and then also this sort of magical realist tradition, I think all of those influence my writing in different ways.
Conexão.